Hey, what's going on? It's Mike Albini, and yes, I'm currently recording this in the bathroom because it has the best lighting in my house. This is my video to complete for the 15 hours of research for my 300-hour internship. I've completed 202 hours, and this is to make up for the last 98 hours, which I would have completed in spring for football. My internship was done at Reinhardt University, and it was predominantly done in regards to photo editing and uploading photos on social media for school, along with introducing myself to video editing. And one thing that I kind of prided myself on was I did everything only through smartphones. I didn't use fancy cameras. I didn't have fancy editing software. I used free editing software through apps. I took and recorded everything on my phone and uploaded everything from my phone. And so what I decided to do was create kind of like a small montage of video and camera and editing tips and tricks from my favorite YouTubers. The first one being Casey Neistat, and the second one being Daniel Schreifer. And I could say I have easily watched over 15 hours of each man. They're both very smart, very creative, very well known in their fields, and throughout their videos, it's not only Casey Neistat, he has a vlog, but he also teaches about cameras and equipment and drones and how to kind of tell stories in videos and how to be more creative with everything. And Daniel Schreifer, he's a predominantly video editor and cinematographer, and he has a lot of video editing tips and tricks and how-to videos on his channel. I consistently watch these on YouTube, not only to learn, but out of just amusement, because I enjoy photography, videography, cinematography, etc. And so I cut up a couple clips from their videos of them teaching some stuff, and I put them into this video to kind of show as evidence. But I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, thank you for this year, and it sucks and it's bad and not the best how this year kind of ended the school year, but we're getting through it. I think everybody, as long as you're being safe and smart, will come out of this stronger, and I'm looking forward to hopefully coming back next year for a master's program. Hope you enjoy.
Cinematography part 3, time lapses and drones. Here's something very important. No one gives a shit about your stupid time lapses, your stupid drone shots. That's something I have to remind myself on a daily basis. That kind of cinematography only works if it's serving a greater purpose. And for me, it serves two purposes. One is transitional. So you'll notice sometimes, like, I'm outside wrapping up a scene where I'm doing something on my skateboard. The next scene I'm in my studio doing something completely different. And in between there might be a beautiful drone shot of the city, or it might be a beautiful time lapse of the city. I'm using it to get me from one scene or one aspect of the story to the next. As that, it's an incredibly effective tool. The other place where it works is to show the audience a broader image of where you are and what's taking place in time. Drones in particular are great for that. I'm at a hotel on a cool beach and it doesn't really work pointing my camera. The drone can give you context that otherwise couldn't. If that kind of ambitious, beautiful cinematography doesn't have a relationship with the narrative, even if it's just a little relationship, it feels out of place and it gets boring very, very fast.
Go ahead and jump into Final Cut and see how this effect is done. So for this effect, I'll be showing you a few different examples, but here we have our first example already lined up in our timeline, and if we play this through, you will see that it is just shy of being 2 seconds long. Now, there are a couple of things that you will want to keep in mind when you go out to shoot your footage. Now, this isn't mandatory, but to do this effect, I shot all of my footage in 4K. And the reason for this is that once you actually track and stabilize and create the effect on the footage, it is going to crop in quite a bit. So capturing your footage in a higher resolution can come in handy, and like I said, it's not mandatory. But with those lower resolutions, you do tend to lose a little bit of quality if you crop in on those those clips, which is why I shoot in 4K. Now, another thing to note is that if I play through this footage frame by frame, you'll notice that there isn't that much motion blur on the subject's face. You can see that on his gloves and his arm, there is quite a bit of blur, but if you're paying attention to the AirPod, it is pretty crisp and clean in each frame. And this is going to help a lot when we track our footage, and if you want to ensure that you get a nice clean track, you can shoot your footage in a higher shutter speed like 1/250 like I did, or you could go even higher. And lastly, when you're shooting your footage, you're going to want to pay attention to the framing of your subject. You can tell here that I was trying to keep the AirPod more or less in the center of the frame, and the closer to the center that the subject you will be tracking is, the less you're going to have to crop in on your footage later. And now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start our effect by bringing in the Stabilizer 2.0 plugin and adding it to our footage. The first thing we're going to do is uncheck our rotation and scale data because we do not need these for this effect. I'll go ahead and open the track editor, and this brings up a new window, and this is where we're going to be tracking our footage. So over here we've got a couple of shape options, but I'm perfectly okay just using the square. Now these controls down here do not actually affect our footage, it just makes things a little bit easier to see when we're tracking. You've also got a hand here to move things around, and you can select it again to turn it off. But I'm gonna start by taking this box and putting it around the AirPod, and then I'm going to adjust the size accordingly. But before you actually do that, it's important to make sure that your playhead is set to the beginning of your timeline down here, because that is where we're going to be starting our track. As for track quality, we're going to push this all the way up to 100%. We will leave our tracking type on position only, and now all we have to do is go ahead and click the track forward button. And you can now see that the auto tracker has started doing its thing, tracking the AirPod automatically frame by frame without us actually having to go in and create keyframes individually on our own. And you can see that the auto tracker has actually done a perfect job tracking our AirPod. So once we're happy with that, we'll go ahead down here and click the export data button. And just like that, we have a perfectly tracked clip, and our AirPod is in the center of the frame the entire time.
Gear doesn't matter. Let me explain. Well, before I get into that, let me just first defend myself, because right now there's a bunch of people writing comments below that are like, easy for you to say, you have all these expensive cameras. That's very true, I do, but I didn't always. My HBO show, which was one of the biggest successes in like my mainstream movie career, was shot on this camera. This isn't even high def. This is shooting on tape. This is the video camera your parents used to film you on for your like 3rd birthday. And some of my biggest videos, like Bike Lanes was shot on this little camera. This thing, what's this called? This is a Canon 300HS. You can buy these used on Amazon for like 90 bucks. If all it took to be good was to have the right equipment, the people who had the most money would always win.
Now, before we actually get into the editing process of these clips, there's a couple of things I want to point out that really help with the effectiveness and seamlessness of the transition. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is that the same background is in both shots. You can see here in the back of our first shot, you have the bank, and then in our second shot, it's the same building behind JR. So to pull off an effect or transition like this one, you don't necessarily have to have the same background in both clips, but it did help in this case to give these two shots that sort of one take style effect. So the next thing I wanted to bring your attention to is that this second shot here was shot purposely with the intention of reversing the clip in post. So what I did was I started with the camera nice and close to JR, using manual focus to make sure that his face is perfectly tack sharp and in focus. That way, once I reverse the clip and JR comes into the frame, I knew I wouldn't miss my focus and he'd be completely sharp, exactly how I wanted it. So now let's move on to actually editing this transition.
Shot on my 3-year-old Galaxy S3. It looks fine. If you don't have money for a camera, just use your cell phone. Cell phones are great. This is my iPhone. If you only have like $100, I highly recommend getting whatever the cheapest point and shoot is from Walmart. This thing, 6 years old, I think it was like 150 bucks when I first got it. Totally adequate. If your budget's closer to 300 bucks, I recommend the Canon S120. That's what this is. It's a really solid camera. I used to shoot everything on this. Now, a lot of people say, but if I have 300 bucks, why wouldn't I just get a GoPro? GoPros are incredible, borderline miraculous little devices. But if you want to make videos, you're better off with a point and shoot like this or one like this. These are just more dynamic. You can do more with something like this. I absolutely love GoPros, but it's really hard to watch like long videos, especially ones that aren't action videos that are shot on GoPros. If you want the very best point and shoot on the market, get the Sony RX100 Mark IV. It's a pretty amazing camera, except for the price. It's like 900 bucks. If you're gonna spend 900 bucks, you'd be much better off with one of these. This is a Canon T6S, which is like the cheapest SLR you can buy that has autofocus. Now you're looking at my main shooter. This is a Canon 70D with a wide angle lens on there. This camera's like 1,300 bucks. That lens is another 500. The microphone's another 200. All in, this is like a $2,000 setup that you're looking at to get this picture and this sound. But if you want to upgrade, this image is from my Canon 5D Mark III with an L series lens on there. So this is like a $5,000 or $6,000 camera. The difference between this and a $2,000 camera is like this. The difference between a $2,000 camera and a $600 camera is like this. This thing's okay. It's about 100 bucks. Now if you spend $200 more and you get one of these, the quality goes way up and the price only goes up a little bit. Now if you spend $300 more than that and you get one of these for 600 bucks, the quality goes way over here, but the price hasn't moved much. Now if you go from 600 to 6,000, the price goes way up and the quality only moves a little bit. As you spend more, you get less and less for your return.
Now it's time to start speed ramping our first clip. Starting at the beginning of the clip and scrubbing through, I'm gonna try and find the point where I want the shot to slow down. I think right around there looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit Shift B on our keyboard, making sure that the clip is selected, and then I'm going to speed up this first portion by 8 times. So I'm going to repeat this process one more time, only this time I'm going to decide where I want the clip to speed back up. So I'm gonna hit play, and I think right there, I already want it to start speeding back up again. So I'm gonna hit Shift B and multiply this by 8 times its original speed. So you can use these here to adjust how smooth your speed ramp transition is. And I'm just gonna play around with this until I'm happy with how it looks. Okay, so after a little bit of tweaking, here is what the speed ramp looks like on our first clip.
Story. Story is all that matters. Story is golden. Story sits at the top of that gigantic pyramid that is filmmaking. Let me do another diagram. Story is king. Everything serves the king. All of this is just here to serve the story. Defining what a story is really, really hard to do. Not sure there's actually like a generic formula to telling stories. You have to find something that an audience is interested in and then share it with them in a way that they're also interested in. The only way to learn these things and get better at these things is by doing it over and over and over. We have all these tools that enable us to create in ways that are more accessible, that are cheaper, that are more fair. That's what excites me the most.